Welcome back to Hugging the Cactus, a Mel Gibson podcast. And today, a special treat. Today, we cover Boss Level. Now, for the many of you who haven't seen this amazing movie, I am here to tell you, you need to see it. You need to see it before you listen to this. I can promise you one thing, you will not be bored. You will not be bored for a second, because this movie does not let up. This movie does not stop for a cigarette. This movie doesn't stop for anything. This movie is one big, action-packed monster. The closest comparison I can come to is Crank High Voltage, maybe? Or Mad Max Fury Road, even. This film should be considered a modern classic. The cast is great. The CGI is great. The story is fantastic. The action is amazing. It's a satisfying movie from beginning to end. And the reason why no one is talking about it, because it bombed. It bombed completely. So normally we would be talking about Mel Gibson and his part in the movie, and we will. But much like Dangerous, we're also going to be looking and perhaps dissecting why this movie didn't do as well as it should have done, which is produce a box office smash and create a modern classic. Because I'm here to tell you, you should watch this movie and you will be the better man for it. Now, why didn't this movie sell? Why? Distribution was not picked up. As a result, it never saw a theater. As a result, it got picked up by some streaming service, was treated as content, which basically is filler of the week. And that was it. That's all she wrote. Much like the straight-to-video movies of the 80s. But is that really it? Or does this movie really have a shot at perhaps being saved from movie purgatory? Because people should really watch this. Why should you watch it? For the sword fights? For the gun porn? For the fast-paced car chases? For the intrigue? For the sci-fi, for the beautiful actresses, for the comedy, for the martial arts. Yeah, why would you watch this movie if they've done everything right? So who dreamed this up? Well, that's a guy called Eddie Borey and his brother Chris. Now, I looked into these guys. There's not a lot to find. But Chris co-wrote Open Grave, movie from 2013, and he started in the industry as a grip, and currently he's a second unit assistant director. And his brother wrote Boss Level, wrote Open Grave, also wrote a movie called Give Baby a Kiss, and he wrote Deadly Beloved. So this is a brother team that's been around for a while, that's been trying to break into the industry, and they came up with this concept, a script, story, and they called it Continue. Now, this got finally picked up by director Joe Carnahan. You'll know Joe Carnahan from stuff like Smoking Aces, The A-Team, and I'm not talking TV show, of course, but the big budget CGI movie. He did The Grey, and he did Cop Shop. So this is no slouch. So he found this script somewhere in 2012. It went into pre-production. Nobody did anything with it. Finally, it got greenlit in 2017 and renamed Boss Level. Now, it was sold to the studios on the premise of this is Groundhog Day, but as an action movie. And that secured a $45 million budget, because when you say Groundhog Day, you're talking classic, you're talking successful. So people start crunching numbers and thinking, oh, well, this could do something. This could really sell. And of course, by that very notion, they shot themselves in the foot, as we will see. Now, Joe Carnahan also produced this movie, and he produced it with a guy called Randall Emmett, a guy called George Furla, and a actor called Frank Grillo. And Frank Grillo is another interesting guy because he's been around for a while. And we've all been rooting for him to succeed, but he just hasn't. Frank has what it takes. Everybody knows he has what it takes, but he just hasn't been able to smash through that glass ceiling or whatever Hollywood has that holds people with great talent back and abuses them in every way possible. Now, we all know what a terrible working environment Hollywood is and how it's filled with despicable people that you just run into at every turn and that just seem to stifle you and thwart you in every way possible, except as long as they can have their way with you, then you can sort of squeeze by. And as we've seen, this happens to actresses, but it also happens to actors, even to someone like Terry Crews. But somewhere in that meat grinder, great commercial art is produced. And for that very reason, we tolerate that place. So Frank ended up as a producer for this movie, saw it for what it was, his shot at molding himself into a leading man action hero, and he went for it. He goes for it in his film. He's swinging for the fences. He looks the part as well. I mean, he's loaded to the gills on gear. You can tell he went on an extensive drug program. He really looks bigger than he normally does. I'd say by about 20 pounds. He also looks harder and more shredded than he usually does. So he really looks the part of the modern day action hero who has perhaps a little bit too much muscle and is perhaps a little bit too veiny for what you expect from a former special forces operative, because those guys tend to be a little pudgy at the end of their career and covered in tats. And they also kept their beard that they all have on deployment. And they wear a lot of baseball caps. Our hero Roy Pulver doesn't. He also has a broken home and an alcohol problem, which is also what you don't see in successful former operatives. Those guys tend to be Christian and conservative and family-oriented, and they have a ton of kids. They're all burdened by responsibility. They invite it. Not so our friend Roy Pulver. It makes me suspect he left the military perhaps not on the best of terms. But that's just a personal observation. That's not in the movie. What is in the movie, you'll be happy to know, is the beautiful and talented Naomi Watts. Now, if you're not familiar with Naomi Watts, perhaps you should watch Mulholland Drive, or you should watch The Ring, or you should watch King Kong. Naomi plays Dr. Gemma Wells, a brilliant scientist who has found a way to build a time machine. And as the movie starts, we are already drawn into the mystery of how exactly this time machine works and how exactly our friend Roy Palmer plays a part in this. And how a certain Colonel Clive Ventor, played by a certain Mel Gibson, figures into all of this. The entire movie, the main character Roy Pulver chases a MacGuffin. But the mystery part is we don't really know what that MacGuffin is, which is unusual. We get a couple of red herrings here and there, and ultimately, of course, we find out what exactly happened. But nothing is as it seems. And that's another joy of this movie. A tremendous surprise ending. Really well crafted, really well plotted, really well paced. Fantastic ending. Now, a lot of the credit of this goes to an uncredited group, which is Blumhouse Production, who were contracted to do another edit after this movie failed to be picked up for distribution. And it's this edit that was dumped on streaming services, particularly Amazon Prime. And they had to go to court for it, because they were never paid. Probably because the movie, or the production company, or whoever produced it, went busto. I mean, this thing cost $45 million to make, and apparently in the sale to streaming, they made about $11.5 million. So that's pretty harsh. Blumhouse contends that their cut was the one used for streaming, and they were owed a percentage. I think it's about 5% of the sale they were told to get to Hulu. but that, according to Blumhouse, never materialized. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why this movie was not promoted enough, even on streaming. But a case can be made that this movie is as good as it is because of that incredible editing job. Because really, you get the same feeling you get when you watch Crank. Now, if you've never seen that Jason Statham movie, I encourage you to watch it because, first of all, you should just watch every Jason Statham movie anyway. But Crank and its successor, actually the better one, High Voltage, is really worth watching. And for the very same reason, you should watch Boss Level, because it's just a blast to watch. It's just one of the funnest movie you could ever watch. Now, obviously, this isn't Groundhog Day turned into an action movie. The premise what they sold it on. What this really is a time loop. And not just a time loop. It's a time loop like a video game. You're playing a video game. The name of the movie betrays it. And the main character, Ron Pulver, as soon as he gets killed, wakes up in the same place again. Just respawns. Over and over and over again. Imagine you're playing a game and there are no safe zones. And you can't save the game. You have to restart it and do it over again every time. That's the feel of this movie. Whenever something happens to him, the stakes are he has to just redo everything. And the editing makes that palatable. Because it doesn't bother you. Because they retell the respawn in such a way that you're actually looking forward to seeing that piece of footage again. That's how good that editing was. That's how well plotted this story is. That's how well paced this story is. You just rewatch stuff again and again and again. They even do gags with it. Show it from a different perspective. Show it from a different angle. And you just rewatch the whole thing again. And the irony is there's really not much to it. But there is. Now there are a ton of cameos in this. The big one really is Ken Jeong, who plays Chef Jake. He's as funny as he is in anything, especially as he is in The Hangover. And there is also Michelle Yeoh, who shows up as a sword fight teacher. My favorite character in the movie is played by Will Sasso, and that's the henchman of Colonel Clive Ventor, played by Mel, and that's Brett, this huge, well, he's probably 350 pounds or something, this huge monster of a guy. Of course, Will Sasso is a comedian, and he brings that. And he's just so much fun to watch. Think of someone with the screen presence of The Rock, if he could act and was funny. And that's what you get with Will Sasso. Ironically, he actually played fake Stone Cold Steve Austin on SmackDown once, if you can believe that. Now, Will Sasso is mostly known for his sketch comedy work. He was on Mad TV for a while. He played a character called Doug Martin on How I Met Your Mother. He played a character called Bill Ryan in Young Sheldon. So he's been around for ages. It's just great to see him in this part. I think he did a really good job. And I hope people wake up to the fact that this guy is just immensely talented and should just be doing a lot more stuff. Another interesting cast member is the addition of Annabelle Wallis, who plays Alice. That's basically the girl who places the bug in one of the molars of Roy Pulver. The thing with the bug is probably my favorite part of the movie, and I won't spoil it for you. Now, you will know Annabelle Wallis mostly from Peaky Blinders. She's been in a ton of other stuff, but will recognize her from that show. And I think the really breakout character in this movie, the actress who just really made her mark, my opinion, is the actress who played Guan Yin, Selena Lo. She's just excellent. And finally, we come to Mel, who plays yet another nasty villain, a man with plans to conquer the world. And in this case, he needs a time machine to do it. Again, the great character actor that he is, he comes up with another figure who just bores people to death with his long diatribes that really go nowhere. It's hilarious. Like in every movie of this type, he does his job well. You really want the hero to kill him. That's his point. That's the whole reason why he was hired. He's the villain. You have to have the feel-good death of the villain, otherwise you don't have a feel-good ending. And much like his character Cormac in The Continental, he has an army of goons. He can be set on our hero, Roy Pulver, who dies and dies and dies again to get past him. Somewhere in between all of this, the main motivation of the character is fleshed out, mostly thanks to the excellent acting abilities of one Naomi Watts, but also because they managed to contract a kid actor who doesn't annoy you. And you'll be surprised to know that it's actually Frank Grillo's son, Rio Grillo. It surprised me for sure. Normally nepotism doesn't really work out, but in this case, this isn't Will Smith's kid, let's put it that way. Now, the cinematography was done by Juan Miguel Aspiros, a Spanish second unit director now. I think this was his first shot at a major movie. I think he did a decent job, but when these things don't become successful, it tends to reflect badly on the people who filmed it for really no good reason. The soundtrack was done by a fairly accomplished composer called Clinton Shorter, who also did the soundtrack for District 9 and for Pompeii and a host of other movies. So you can't really fault the soundtrack. It's hard to fault this movie to begin with. It's really excellent. And it's sad that this somehow got the short end of the stick. And of course that doesn't help that it came out in 2020/2021 at the height of a era where nobody was able to go to the movies in the first place. So go watch this movie and enjoy it, and don't be surprised that at the end of the movie you just watch it again, because that's what happened to me. I watched it and I just backed it up and I just watched it again because I enjoyed it that much, and that is a rare, very rare occurrence. And it's one of the reasons I included this movie in this season, because I just felt it important, not just because it was an interesting footnote in Mel Gibson's career. I mean, after all, it's just a bad guy he played, probably as a lark, for good money, because he's billed as the main star. He's really probably one of the reasons they were able to get the budget they could get. Frank Grillo gets a little rub from this. Not as much as he deserves, perhaps, but it's nice to see him interacting with Mel Gibson. I think that their scenes together were really good. I've really been rooting for Frank Grillo to make it big ever since he played a cop in The Shield. Everyone who's seen Prison Break remembers him from that. He was in Kingdom, and of course, and that's another movie well worth watching. He's in Cop Shop, also directed by Joe Carnahan, so at least he has a good connection there. They work well together. Really wish this movie the cult status it deserves. It really should be revered for its excellence. It deserves to be up there with movies like Bullet Train. I encourage you to watch this movie. You won't be disappointed. And I'd like to think that's my contribution to this film, because I'm Guan Yin and I have done this. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.